Good morning. This is Pat O'Connell calling to order the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission regular open meeting. It is Thursday, November 14th, 10 a.m. We're here in the Welcome Building and online. Mr. Cameron, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Ellison,
Present.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Present.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Present.
All commissioners that are here, and you have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Great. Next up is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. And we have a agenda that was posted on Monday. Any changes desired for the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I do have one request that we move item number 5. That's the case on the PNM Renewable Energy Act plan for 2025 to the regular action agenda.
Okay. Any other changes?
None from me.
And I suggest we just take that as the first regular action item. Keep the community solar cases together. Okay, so I move that we proceed with the posted agenda with one modification. Item 5 from consent agenda will become the first regular action item.
I'll second.
Commissioner Ellison. Aye. Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The motion to proceed with the agenda as modified passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone here today to give public comment? Mr. Rodriguez, do we have anyone online?
Mr. Chair, we don't have anyone online for public comment.
Great, thank you. Next up is announcements. We'll start with Office of General Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just gonna do a quick reminder for folks of the upcoming meeting schedule for the holidays. Instead of having a meeting on Thanksgiving Day, we're gonna have a meeting on the 26th of November at 10 a.m. That'll be here. And then we'll have our next regular meeting on December 12th. And then we'll follow that with one on December 19th, and there won't be one on December 26th, which is a regular scheduled date. And then the first one of the year will be on January 9th. And then we'll go to our 2-week schedule from there.
Thank you. Then I know we've got some announcements from our chief of staff. So if you want to do that now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to announce a new employee who started with us on Tuesday. Peterson Brasi has joined us in the Utilities Division as a public utilities economist in our accounting bureau. Welcome, Peterson.
Thank you.
Welcome, Peterson. Next, commissioners, I have a recitation to read from a closed session, so I'll do that now. On November 6th, 2024, the commission met in closed session, which was closed pursuant to NMSA 1978, squiggly thing 1015-1H3, deliberations by a public body in connection with an administrative adjudicatory proceeding. I affirm for the record that the matters discussed in the closed session were limited only to those specified in the separate notice and agenda for that closed meeting, specifically to discuss the recommended decision in docket number 23-00071 UT in the matter of the tariffs, agreements, and forms proposed by the qualifying utilities for the community solar program. I further affirm no final actions were taken in the closed meeting. The next, between now and our next open meeting, which will be the Tuesday, 2 weeks from now instead of 2 weeks from now. We do have a public comment session on the rulemaking that's ongoing for the rural electric co-ops and their renewable energy portfolio standards. Parties have submitted written comments on, I think it was the 31st, but we're also going to have a open meeting to accept public comment. I know that's on Zoom. Mr. Lundin, is that hybrid or just on Zoom? The rulemaking public comment session on a week from today. I think it's just on Zoom, but. I guess we haven't noticed it yet, so when you get the notice, we'll announce whether that'll be in person. It will certainly be on Zoom and people have opportunity to provide comment on that rulemaking process if you're interested. And again, it'll start at 10 a.m. Commissioners, did you have any other announcements?
No, thank you.
Okay. So next item on the agenda is the prior meeting minutes. We have minutes from the October 17th, 2024, ready for approval. Commissioners, any changes we need to make to the draft that we have? Yeah, I reviewed them. I didn't see any changes. I did get Mr. Wilcox's name spelled correctly, but other than that, nothing.
Nothing for me.
No, thank you. Great. Then I moved the approval of the minutes for the October 17th regular open meeting.
I second.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
The motion to approve the minutes passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. So next we have the consent action items. Again, that was modified when we changed the agenda. So we have 5 consent action items. Any discussion, questions, comments on those? No? Then I will move for approval of the potential orders on the consent agenda.
A second.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The motion to adopt the items on the consent action agenda passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great. Okay, so then moving on to regular action items, the first thing to discuss is case number 24-00207 UT. That's the matter of PNM's Renewable Energy Act plan for 2025 and proposed rate rider. We have a potential final order and we'll begin with presentation from Mr. Lundin.
Good morning, commissioners.
Morning.
So as you described, this docket relates to PNM's annual REA plan. For this, or for next year, PNM is proposing no new renewable energy procurements. Their plan is to meet the RPS with their existing resources and recs. Thus, this case is kind of boils down to a simple accounting of the rider charge, and for next year, the rider will be decreasing a small amount. So ratepayers will see some savings on that. The only kind of issue that sticks out in this case relates to the Lightning Dock geothermal facility. The hearing examiner spent some time in the RD writing about it, and ultimately they recommend that the commission open the docket to investigate the facility and its operations further and its purchase power agreement with PNM. By the terms of the RD itself, in approving the RD in full, as my final order would do, it would not open the docket. The RD doesn't have those decretal paragraphs in it to do that. So whether the commission wants to open a docket on that or not and accept that recommendation, it has to do it in this final order. So what I've proposed to you is to accept the recommendation of your hearing examiners and open a docket to begin that investigation. Now, would you like me to say anything further about the Lightning Dock facility or what the investigation might entail?
Well, no, I think you've presented what's in front of us. Commissioner Ellison, you wanted to discuss this, so.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no issue with accepting the PNM's Renewable Energy Act plan for 2025. I really see that as a distinct issue from calling for opening an inquiry into the Lightning Dock plant. So, and that's something that we could do at any time, open that inquiry into that plant. So, what I'm going to propose is that we delete the decretal paragraph B, which calls for that opening of that inquiry. And then there are just two supporting paragraphs, 14 and 15, which I would also propose to delete, since they are just supportive of opening that inquiry. And, let me say a few words why, I really don't think that it's warranted to open this this inquiry at this time. It's a very small plant, around 10 megawatts, and PNM is purchasing the power at a rate that was approved by the commission, and customers, PNM, and therefore its ratepayers, are only paying for the power that's produced by the plant. So to the extent that the plant is not operating at the capacity that was expected, PNM ratepayers are still only paying for the power that was actually produced. So I just, given our limited resources, and given that customers are only paying for the power actually produced, I question whether it's worth our time, quite frankly, to initiate this inquiry. I think we might be better served by opening an inquiry into, why isn't there more geothermal in New Mexico? Why are more plants not being proposed, given the geothermal resource that we have? And can the commission and the legislature do anything to help support geothermal in New Mexico? So I just don't, I guess I haven't been convinced that opening the inquiry makes sense.
Thank you for that. Mr. Aguilera, do you have any?
Well, thank you for raising that, Commissioner Allison. I am also inclined not to open an additional investigation. My understanding of the RD is that it kind of treats this in two different ways. One of them is recommending to open an investigation, but then that's not in the decretal paragraphs. The second one is to continue to receive the information about Lightning Dock in the next REA plan. And so I think if we were to adopt the RD with just asking for the information about Lightning Dock in the next REA plan, that allows the commission to continue to monitor the facility. And so I agree with you, Commissioner Ellison, that I don't see that the investigation is necessary in this instance. So I certainly would be amenable to that change. With respect to I think you're suggesting, if I have it correctly, deleting ordering paragraph B and paragraphs 14 and 15. I think that we probably could replace paragraph 14 with just a statement that says we adopt the RD's decretal paragraph that says that the lightning dock should be discussed in the next REA plan. So replacing paragraph 14 with something that says, because otherwise we talk about lightning dock and then the conversation about it just kind of ends. So just for completeness of the order, I think I would recommend that.
Mayor. Yeah, I was going to recommend, if this, I guess, motion passes, I guess we don't have a motion yet, sorry, but if we remove the decretal paragraph B, that there's two ways, either, yeah, another like short statement, kind of bringing a conclusion to that discussion that's in the order, or you just remove the whole discussion, have a very simple order that just adopts the RD. With investigations, the commission has, ultimate discretion. The rule is very liberal, so, under these circumstances, I don't even think you would be required to provide an explanation, especially since we've had the discussion here in the public.
Yeah, thank you both for that. Yeah, I agree that we've got limited resources. For me, the value of investigation isn't looking at lightning dock. It's looking at the bigger picture of what utilities' responsibilities are to actively manage purchase power agreements. Make sure that they're managing them on behalf of customers with the thought of optimizing moving forward to New Mexico's policy goals as cost effectively as possible. Could be that concept gets lost if it's just pointed at one PPA. So I would be in favor of opening an inquiry, but maybe this one's too narrow because, like I say, that it's not about lightning dock per se. It's about utilities should be managing these contracts for the overall public interest. And whether that happened here or not, I don't know. So that's why inquiry I thought was an okay thing to do. But having said that, I'll support whatever sounded like. I preferred your suggestion of let's leave the lightning dock in here and conclude it with a different paragraph 14.
Yeah, so that I suggest that just kind of reacting to the deletion of the decretal paragraph B, and well, I guess that was the one that opened the investigation for those who don't have the benefit of seeing the draft. The suggestion that our council made here also works, I think. But
Yeah, that works. And then I guess it'll just be on me to deeper dug in to figure out when we do have, scope out and define an investigation, because I don't want to let this opportunity go. It's a great example to explore of what utilities obligations are, and at a minimum provide guidance, if not go deeper than that on what they should be doing.
it sounds maybe then that keeping the discussion about lightning dock is
Yeah, I think so, just because it is something the hearing examiners dug into. We got the recommendation we did just because they were unsatisfied with the result, but I think they went as far as they felt like they could because of what Mr. Ellison said, what is lightning docking. So that was my takeaway when I read the article. Okay, so sounds like, and Mr. Lundin, sound like you had a good sense of what Commissioner Aguilera was describing for just revising paragraph 14.
Yes, sir, I understand. So to make a notation that we're accepting the recommendation of continued reporting requirements for the lightning dock facility, but declining to open an investigation.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll move that we approve an order that edits what's before us by making the revision to paragraph 14 that you just described, Mr. Lundin, and deleting paragraph 15 and deleting the decretal paragraph B.
I second.
Any more discussion? Especially with Mr. Lundin, do you have any questions for us?
No, sir.
Commissioner Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The motion to approve the order, excuse me, as edited, passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Okay, next up is case 24-00263 UT. It's renewable energy or REIA, CCSA and Prosperity Works request for a variance. And Mr. Fisk.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This is a petition in the community solar, concerning the community solar program, a petition for a variance from a commission order from 2023 that had extended the deadline that was in the commission's community solar rule to for meeting the 30% low income subscription requirement that's in the act, and also the rule was extended to, in that previous order, to the earlier of the commercial operation date of a project, or 1 year from the from entering into an interconnection agreement with the utility for a project. And CCSA, REIA, and Prosperity Works, and their the petition that is before the commission, have asked, since there are some interconnection agreements that have been entered into, and some were recently, and some were, I believe, earlier in the year, and commercial operation may be a little ways off, because no one has broken ground yet, that they would prefer that the deadline to meet the 30% requirement be changed to simply be the commercial operation date of the project. And I'm recommending that the commission grant that petition, because that seems like a reasonable time period. I mean, I would guess that most of these projects that the developers will want to be fully subscribed, at least, or at least mostly subscribed by the time they begin operations anyway. So this will be a very, what do I say, lenient or deadline.
Great, thank you for that. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Fisk or any discussion on this one? For my part, I understand why they filed the petition. Makes sense to me. But
I don't have any questions.
I don't either, you know, in light of the delays that have been encountered here, I think it's a reasonable request and don't have an issue with it.
all right, then I will move that we adopt the order granting the petition that Mr. Fisk has presented.
I'll second.
Mr. Cameron?
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilar.
Aye.
The motion to approve the order as presented passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
New land speed record for you, Mr. Fisk.
And I'll just be moving over because I believe that for the next item, Aaron would like to have me.
Oh, good.
Mr. Chair, can I follow up on something real quick while we're in between
Please
here?
do, yeah.
It was on the docket we were talking about before, the rulemaking and the public comment, and whether it was going to be in person or on Zoom. I'm looking at the order right now, the NOPR and the calendar invite, and it looks to me like it's just going to be on Zoom. I don't see any requirement for it to be in person. So
That's what I saw too. I just wanted to verify. So,
Yeah.
So what we were talking about was earlier in the agenda announcement section, there will be a public comment hearing a week from today at 10 o'clock. It's available to all via Zoom.
The docket on that is 22-00140 UT.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next up is case 23-00071 UT. Matter of the tariffs, agreements, and forms proposed by qualifying utilities for a community solar program. We have a discussion that led by Ms. Lecoq from Office of General Counsel. And we also have help in the room, so if you can get us started, I appreciate it.
I will try. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. What I have, of course, my computer is deciding right now to update its firmware. So I'm gonna look at the paper that I have in front of me. I have two orders for your consideration and discussion today. The first one leaves a lot of questions unanswered, but largely adopts a lot of the parts in the recommended decision. But I think there's a lot of room for discussion in this order, answering some of the questions that need to be answered so that we can move forward. The second one holds in reserve the most of the decisions made or recommendations made in the recommended decision pending a rulemaking to reexamine the solar bill credit rule. And I don't know that I have a whole lot more to say this side. Just see what you think.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start with Commissioner O'Connell's point of view is I'd like to get as far as we can. But then Chair O'Connell will turn it over to my colleagues to hear where we're at as a team. Commissioner Ellison, you provided one late last night. Do you want to go first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The version of the order that I've proposed is quite a marked departure from the path that we've been on, and that is unlikely to make folks very happy. I realize that. In my view, we're, the path that we've been going down is a difficult one. And I think that we would be well served just to reevaluate, redo our rule in an expedited manner, and very quickly adopt the solar bill credits that would be outlined in the new rule. I think the issue is that the rule that was adopted in 2022 closely tracks the statute. Unfortunately, I think the goal of a rulemaking is not to copy the statute, which ours did, but to really clarify and operationalize it, which it didn't. I think that after having having gone through what we have with the briefings and the case material, we've got so much more information than we did at the time that the rule was adopted. Frankly, community solar was a very new concept at the time, and I don't think there was a great deal of understanding of it when the rule was adopted. And so, rather than sort of push ahead with what we've got, I think we could come to a more fair and a more fair resolution faster if we just were willing to to revise the rule in an expedited manner for these first round projects. In my view, the legislature in adopting the Community Solar Act really wanted a successful community solar program that would entail little to no subsidy. And I think if we really get together and put aside some of the issues that the current rule forces us to go through, we would have a better shot of reaching that outcome.
Okay, just so I can make sure I understand that better, could you help walk me through the rule and like which provisions of the rule would you like to revisit?
Well, I think the provisions that deal with the solar bill credit would be the key. I think that whole issue needs to be dealt with in a rulemaking as opposed to in a final order. I think the way that the current rule deals with it, is very unclear, and has caused, a lot of, no, that's not a good solar bill credit calculation, submit another. No, that's not good, submit another. And I think by, really working through that and being more clear about what should go into a solar bill credit in the rulemaking, we'd be better off. I have concerns with, the current rulemaking excludes trans fees, and I know that's been a debate all along, and it has created higher solar bill credit calculations, and then in turn that's caused the utilities to ask for a clawback mechanism in the bills to sort of adjust for that. And I think it's all needlessly complex, and if we sort of started out with more or less a clean slate and really looked at what do the developers need for this to be successful, and what's fair to non-subscribers, I think we could spell out a solar bill credit in a better fashion than results from the current rule.
Okay, and then you talked about redoing the rule in an expedited manner, and then we could quickly approve solar bill credits after that. Do you have a process or a schedule in mind?
Well, my thinking around the expedited process is that, we could do it as quickly as we could, perhaps even on a 3-month schedule, as long as, that is legally feasible. And then following the revision of the rule, I think it should be fairly straightforward for the utilities to calculate the solar bill credits that comport to that more clear rule.
Yeah, I know I was asking OGC, if you could explain to me how long a rulemaking process would take. Is 3 months even possible?
Yes, that would depend on how, I mean, if the commission issued a notice of proposed rulemaking and a proposed rule right away at the beginning of the case, that could be possible. But the commission needs to take some time to come up with a proposed rule. Then, you know, that would be where there might be some extra time. The time that has to be in there is from the issuance, the publication of the NOPR and the New Mexico Register. There has to be 30 days between that and the hearing. And commission will probably want written comments as well. That can be, I mean, that can be fairly compressed. So that's just, so 30 days, you have to have that 30 days, and then whatever's reasonable around that. There are no other minimum time requirements than the 30 days, but you need to build in time for, you know, comment and hearing period, which is at least 2 weeks above the 30 days. If you do it very quickly, usually it's like 3 weeks. But and then after the record is closed, which can be done immediately at the end of that comment period within a few days, then, you know, time to draft the proposed amendments to the rule, and for the commission to consider and rule upon the proposal. So I don't know, that could be another 3 or 4 weeks. Plus, people can file motions for a hearing. They have 30 days to do that. And the commission has to rule on that within 20 days. So that could add, you know, up to 50 more days on top of that. So just the 30 and the 50 and maybe 5, 6 weeks on top of that. I need a calculator. I'm not a math major.
Thank you. I mean, and then what we've been doing before issuing NOPRs is having workshops. Were you planning on that?
Yes, I think that would be wise to have a workshop to try to work through what the what the rulemaking revisions might be before we get sort of into the formal NOPR process, where, you know, we're kind of debating off of something that has been noticed. We're in a bit more of a formal situation at that point. So having an initial workshop to discuss it in a more informal manner before officially putting out the NOPR, I think would be a good idea.
And so then that gets me back to question is, what does expedited look like in terms of how much time are we talking about?
Right, I understand. We would want to hold that workshop as soon as possible, and of course the holidays come up, but I think that, you know, we would want to try to adhere as closely to the legally required minimum times as we could.
And then last question was, I looked at this final order, and not a lawyer, but it looks like it's an order that doesn't conclude anything or doesn't result in anything. What's the point of taking an action by adopting this suggestion?
Right, I suppose what it does is it it is a declaration that we think this is the proper path forward, and it commits us to this expedited workshop process and rulemaking, but it doesn't, obviously it's not a notice of proposed rulemaking in and of itself. So, I suppose we could just not adopt it and proceed with a workshop and an expedited rulemaking if that was the path we wanted to take.
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would just note that the commission may want to have this docket fully adjudicated and closed before holding a workshop, because there'd be issues of potential ex parte communications, because the same subject matter may come up. Now, it may be possible to separate those things out, especially because the decision of the commission in that case would be not to make a decision on section 20 regarding the calculation of solar bill credit. But if the commission were to issue a final order today, there would of course be 30 days for filing of motions for rehearing. And then the commission would have 20 days. So if the commission could possibly start that rulemaking, hold a workshop, but we'd have to somehow separate out the issues. Now, if the commission decides it's not going to decide anything about the credit in this case, then I think you could argue that at the workshop, if you discuss that, then you're not overlapping on subject matter, and you're not pre-deciding or having communications with parties about this matter. But while the motion for rehearing period is open, even if there's no pending motion for rehearing, there's a possibility that someone would file something and a motion, and then if a workshop is held during that time and similar issues are discussed, would say, the commission is either has had ex parte communication, so it might inhibit the ability of the commission to speak freely with who would be essentially the same parties probably in both matters at a workshop.
So if the vote today was to adopt version 2, that should include a process that closes the current docket.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that wouldn't actually fix the problem of the fact that the the rehearing provisions of the statute, it's not within the Community Solar Act, but within the Public Utility Act, would preempt anything the commission would do to say we're not going to consider them. Now, we haven't had a case where as far as I can recall, where the motion for rehearing section of the PUA was applied to community solar. But I would say probably would apply, because generally the court has found that procedural provisions of the Public Utility Act do apply to other related acts, such as the Efficient Use of Energy Act, Renewable Energy Act. So probably people would have a right under the 621016, the rehearing section of the Public Utility Act, to file those motions, whether or not the commission closed the docket.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussions on this version 2?
Well, one thing you mentioned, Commissioner Ellison, was that the rule closely tracks the statute, which I agree. And then you mentioned, the transmission component, which so there are, some deviations. But I'm wondering if the rule closely tracks the statute, what do we gain by reopening it? I mean, how do we end up at a different answer? Or how do we, if so,
I-
how?
I think we certainly can. Like I said, I don't think the objective of a rule should be to copy and paste from the statute. I think the expectation was that, we would apply our technical judgment as to how to best calculate a solar bill credit. And so, I think, there is, my reading of the statute is that there is flexibility there for us to come up with a different method for calculating the solar bill credit than is currently in the rule. So yes, that would be my objective, is to come up with a different solar bill credit calculation.
Because we still have, like the total aggregate retail rate is defined in the statute. I mean, I could see a situation where if that wasn't in the statute, then, we have the solar bill credit, and then we can come up with something that would be simpler. The way the statute is written, it in a way pigeonholes us into calculating it in a very complicated way. And so I just want to make sure that if we do start over here, which, it is concerning, because I think what we want to do, and you said it, the legislature wants us to design rules that allow this program to succeed. And if we reopen this issue, we create uncertainty. And I certainly would, be willing to do that if we're going to come up with something that is clear and is going to move the program forward more quickly. We have a lot of exceptions and comments here that are asking us to make a decision already, telling us that we have the information already. And so, I'm willing to take a step back if we're going to be able to move forward more quickly, but I just want to make sure that we would be able to accomplish that. And I'm a little concerned that we would end up in a similar place given how the statute is written. The other thing that I would add is, a benefit of a new rule is that we could prescribe clear terms here that would result in a more uniform program for community solar developers and facilities to use across the state, not have to learn, the different rules of each utility individually. And then also the record is pretty unclear. I think that there are situations where terms are confusing or conflated. Like, for example, the lost revenues did confuse me initially. It took me a while to really understand what it meant. And so we do have a quite confusing record here that maybe could be clarified if we start over. But what I don't want to do is set the program back.
I make comment, Commissioner Aguilera, I understand your concerns. I guess I would point out a couple of things. The definition of the community solar bill credit in the statute, I think, is helpful. It says the credit value of electricity generated by a community solar facility and allocated subscriber. So the credit value of electricity. So I think that's a helpful definition. And when we look into the calculation discussion, it does say, derived from the qualifying utilities total aggregate retail rate. As I see it, and it also gives us the, provided that non-subscribers shall not subsidize costs attributable to subscribers. So, I see some flexibility in there that, perhaps was not acknowledged when the rule was initially developed. I too would rather have a more simple way to calculate the solar bill credit than the what has been outlined here. If we're stuck with this total aggregate retail rate methodology, I think we could still use that methodology to come up with a solar bill credit that would be sufficient for developers to realize projects, yet not result in too much of a subsidy for non-subscribers. So I guess what I'm saying is that even if we are stuck with that sort of methodology, I think we have more flexibility than our current rule, allows for in calculating that solar bill credit.
Right. I think my point is, don't we already have that in the current rule, save for 57320D, which is, I think, one you're highlighting about transmission. Don't we already have that flexibility in the current rule?
Well, again, I would hope that the rule would really operationalize and really be helpful in describing in more detail how the solar bill credit should be calculated. Instead it just copies over the rule and adds the, you shall not subtract transmission fees, which is not explicitly stated here. So it really isn't, the rule isn't all that helpful in providing guidance as to how to calculate the solar bill credit. And I think that's, caused some difficulties in this case. Right.
Yeah, I appreciate this. And for my part, the thing that I'm having a hard time understanding is you've expressed desire for more flexibility by rewriting the rule. But the examples you've given create more of a formula, so less flexibility. So am I seeing that wrong?
Well, I mean, so what I would be in favor of is revising the rule in such a way that it is more prescriptive and clear in providing guidance as to how to calculate the solar bill credit. You know, as I see it, what we've got now, unfortunately, seems to be leading to a solar bill credit that, appears to be too high. That it's higher than is needed to develop a project, in my view, and also would result in larger than required subsidies. So what I'm saying is that I believe that there is the flexibility within the statute to rethink that and to come up with a solar bill credit calculation that would really lead us to a solar bill credit that is more fair to all parties. I think with what we have now, the direct result of what we have now is the utilities pushing back and asking for these clawback mechanisms to try to blunt, to try to reduce the level, and it's essentially a backdoor method of reducing the solar bill credit. And I think it would be better just to attack that issue head on and come up with a formulation that is just more fair, and so that you don't have the necessity of these backdoor methods.
I think so. I think you're right. There's this total aggregate retail rate, but I think that's what's creating the need to, the clawback, the recovery that you were referencing. But that total aggregate retail rate is defined in the statute, and so that's kind of the difficulty. It's treating a community solar project kind of as if it was the utility itself. But it's not the utility, it's closer to a generator.
Right. And what I'm saying is I think we can deduct more than just the distribution cost components and come up with a lower, more equitable number.
And you believe rewriting the rules required to do that?
I think we can't do it with the existing rule.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah,
I think you said that. I just.
Yeah, we can't do that with the existing rule.
And then Commissioner Aguilera, you said something that's kind of not the same, but yeah, I found the same thing. Some parties would use the same words very differently, and that made it interesting to try to work through how to pull all this stuff together. So current record's unclear. I agree with that. Do you see a way to improve the current record quicker than doing a rule rewrite? And if I mean, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here, but would you see value in a path to improve the current record? Or would that be similar? And maybe I should be asking OGC this question.
It's unclear, as I read the exceptions, they sort of, some of them go back and correct some of what was said during the testimony phase. I think the confusion maybe already happened and maybe is clarified now, at least I think so, but maybe I'm still confused. I don't know. I think we probably have the information that we need. And I understand Commissioner Ellison's point. You know, I think what you're saying is your perspective that we need to achieve something that is fair for all parties. And I think that's something we would all agree on for the developers, for the utility, for subscribers and non-subscribers as well. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think probably it would help to clarify the record as a whole. I'm not sure that we would necessarily end up somewhere different. The transmission issue is a very tricky one. I certainly agree that the subscribers use transmission at some point, but I also see the argument that they avoid the need for more transmission. And so it's a very, and it might depend on the circumstance, right? They're using it at night, obviously. They might be reducing the peak. It kind of depends. And, you know, the utility also, if all of a sudden it's cloudy, the utility needs to be there to make up for the reduction in generation. And so it needs to reserve capacity, and reserving that capacity is not free. It's just a very tricky issue, and that's very complicated.
Yeah, no, I hear all of that. What I'm trying to do is acknowledge that we're never gonna have, and we never do. There is not a case where everything was nailed down to where this is the right answer. So it's our job to interpret rules and laws and fill in, operationalize them, as you said. So that's kind of where I'm at, is, well, how is the situation getting better by taking the time? And it sounds to me like we're not talking 3 months, we're talking 6 months. To just back up and do a new rulemaking process. On the other hand, yeah, things like transmission are tricky, because in addition to everything Commissioner Aguilera said, if we're out there selling community solar to people saying you have a subscription at that facility, there's some interesting examples in there. Like, there's no way for a resident of Clayton to use the Clayton Community Solar Facility without using the transmission system. Or if you're in Clayton and you want to subscribe to Silver City, you're using the transmission system. So that's the kind of thing where that's what the law says. The rule says what the law says. So how do we deal with it the best? Those are the kind of the areas where I'm struggling. And because that comes from the law, I don't know how creating a more prescriptive process in a rulemaking fixes that. And so that's why I was asking you the questions I was asking, is what's the promise of we can't do anything today, versus trying to work through what we have and putting together the best we can do, and then knowing it's going to be iterative, because history of this is motion for rehearing. So.
Yeah. So one thing that is still not entirely clear to me is what are we doing with these tariffs? In both options, are they being accepted? Are they being rejected? I think they're being rejected, and so, right, they would need to be refiled, all of them completely.
Yes, the first order number 1, yes, rejects the tariffs and would ask them to be refiled pending some clarification that would come from you about what needs to be in there. The second order, again, just kind of holds everything in reserve. So it doesn't doesn't reject, it doesn't, we're not gonna make decisions on that, although ultimately, practically, the end result would be, yes, they would be rejected, they would have to be refiled, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think that's what maybe Mr. Fisk was talking about is how could you have this rulemaking if you still have these open? Wouldn't they need to be rejected in order to closed, in order to have that rulemaking process? So in either of these options, they're being rejected and will need to be refiled.
Yeah, my understanding of what we're calling version 1 is it works through the issues that were highlighted in the RD, addresses exceptions. What's not in here yet is just, here's the things that get included in a solar bill credit. And maybe we can come up with that list. Maybe we can't. And then, yeah, it, just because of utilities, as you described, played Bring Me a Rock, and they brought us a rock, and then we're like, well, this is the different way to calculate that rock, so it's only by magic that you might have calculated it correctly, so it's just reject and refile with this new instruction. So anyway, the work today would be either filling in the blanks on version 1 or providing enough guidance that OGC can redraft version 1 in a way that we can approve it in 10 days. Because the two paths that I was thinking about when I was working on preparing for today's meeting. And then version 2, it just holds everything in reserve. It doesn't, as written, doesn't do what would need to be done, right? It doesn't say hold it, probably reject everything, not hold it in reserve, and then open a new rulemaking, and even better, have an actual procedural schedule that lets you know what is it that I'm signing up for by adopting version 2. So there's work to do on either version. So I guess what I would entertain is a 10-minute break to refill the water bottle, and then when we come back, let's talk about which version want to work on next.
Great.
So back at 11:20. Okay, we're back. I was gonna make a proposal and happy to debate it or have other suggestions, and then that was gonna be ask Ms. LaCope to walk us through version 1 just to see how far away we are from having that doable. I know there's a lot to do if we wanted to proceed down version 2, so I just want to see the differences. So again, if somebody's got a better idea, I'm all for it, but that was my idea. Take it away.
Okay, so walking you through version 1. Starting on, let's see, page 5 is where we talk about public interest and subsidization. This version, the analysis that was provided in the recommended decision about what the public interest entails, I think is very comprehensive. I think we don't have a very clear definition of what the public interest is, especially with respect to this program. And so the recommended decision comes up with a definition of the public interest that is proposed in here. So that's section A. I'm going to walk through the whole thing or stop here.
My thought was just, we know that there are some placeholders in here, and I tried to come prepared to help fill in those placeholders without thinking I had a perfect solution. So I was also hoping for the wisdom of the group.
Okay.
So anyway, if we could just, I think it's worth it just step through version 1 and say, in addition, version 2 was just a declaration that we want the rule to be better. Version 1 actually takes the issues that are in the recommended decision and provides decisions on all of them, good or bad.
Okay.
So if you could just, I guess, go ahead and talk through the heading, but if there's nothing that's,
okay,
if we think we're in a good spot through recommended, case and RD and exceptions and final order, that we don't really need to do much for that section. I just mentioned that it's there, but
okay,
let's go ahead and just dig in. And I'm asking you to do this because I think some of these things might depend on others.
Okay.
So if you want to pick something that if this issue gets resolved, it helps with other issues, that works. You don't have to go in the order
okay.
of the document.
Well, and I guess I'll just start by saying this first section, the first A, B, and C, really just kind of established the framework of the legal framework, right? This is what the program itself is in the public interest. Here's what we think the public interest is. Here's what we think what we think the legislature was talking about when it talked about a subsidy. So all of that is in there. It largely adopts the recommended decisions, analysis, and conclusions with respect to that. The only difference, I think, is that in the kind of going on of what I've heard the commission talk about earlier today, is that we want to start with this baseline that we don't necessarily know that a subsidy is in the public interest yet because we haven't gotten there. So that's what this order finds. It doesn't say that a subsidy is not in the public interest, but it doesn't find that it is. And then therefore sets kind of a baseline standard subsidization level at 0% for now, with the idea that we're going to have to look at the program as a whole and then look at each specific project and determine whether a subsidy is appropriate from that point. So it leaves the commission, that question is, it's not really open, but it leaves you room to make a decision later about the subsidization limit.
So can I ask a question on that? So then is it left to be decided on a case-by-case basis when there's a rate case filed?
Russell, I think that is something that you can decide. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about specific language of this order, but the commission in setting the tariffs, the commission would generally use whatever the most recent numbers that came out of a rate case are. You wouldn't have to wait until another rate case is held. Some things do get updated. I think especially like value of recs and things like that get updated when and I think also there's some in our rule, there's another component, but that's not saying that the utilities have to hold a rate case before we can do tariffs. It's just that the most recent rate case will be used, and then tariffs can be updated as rate cases proceed in the future with more updated information.
Okay, because I think the way these mechanisms are set up is that there is a credit and then costs are tracked, and then there's like a recovery. And in order to determine if there is any kind of subsidy, you have to take into account the benefits that were provided and then compare those with the costs. And so if I'm understanding then correctly, is this order is finding that we cannot make that decision right now?
So there's a circular question here, right? Because the other questions that are in the recommended decision and that are before the commission are things like what constitute avoided costs. The recommended decision has recommendations about that, but that's really a question, you know, is that what is that? And then go from there. So I think that's to the chair's point that, you know, if we talk about a 0% subsidization limits, now we don't know that yet because we haven't answered all these other questions. So we need to answer the other questions about what's an avoided cost, what are the other, you know, what needs to be recaptured in order to determine that subsidy limit.
Okay, thank you. I'm following that. I think there are two questions. One of them is whether there's any subsidy at all. And then the other one is whether a subsidy of up to 3% would be in the public interest.
Not quite. The first question is there shall be no subsidization, period. Like non-subscribers shall not subsidize subscribers unless the commission finds it is in the public interest to do so, and then it's capped at 3%.
Yeah.
So there's no subsidization, or if it's in the public interest, how much of a subsidy would be permitted up to 3%.
Yeah, thank you for the rephrasing. I do agree with that. I think maybe I was skipping forward a little bit. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you helping me with that.
Sure. Okay, so then from there we go to I think section D, the big section 2. So we have the legal framework, section 2, then talks about the solar bill credit. And kind of stops there. How are we going to calculate the solar bill credit? So that is a question before the commission that is going to need to be answered. We have guidance from the statute, obviously, we have guidance from the rule, but using that guidance, how are we going to do that? And then the third section talks about the tariffs, but there's going to need to be guidance from the commission to provide to the utilities to reject and refile the tariffs, which I think because each of them is different, I don't see any way around that. So that's what the recommended decision had recommended, that they be rejected and refiled in accordance with, guidance, whatever ends up in the final order. So the order largely agrees with the recommended decision with respect to that, as well as the cost recovery riders. So all of those, kind of depend on, the solar bill credit and voided costs and all of those other things. And then the remainder of the order actually just talks about just kind of these questions, kind of remaining questions, whether the act requires the commission to exclude potential customers based on their participation in other programs. And these, I don't know that this is something that we really need to discuss in this meeting. That talks about the credit excess kilowatt hours do not reduce monthly minimum charges. Most of this really is adopting the recommended decisions, analysis, and findings. However, there are questions that are not in this order that I can bring to you now that need to be answered. These are from the recommended decision. And I don't know if you want to go there yet, but there are holes in the order that also need to be filled in. And I can run through those if you'd like, or.
Well, just let me.
Yeah.
Summarize what I think you just said, and then we could transition to the next list, but I do want to hear that list. When I was analyzing this, what I saw was providing, here's how solar bill credit gets calculated, and then telling utilities, come back to us with recalculation based on what you have there. That is of value. And then the whole question about subsidies, that I appreciate the conversation you and Commissioner Aguilera had, that those two are related to each other. So for me, it's let's set what we think subsidies should be, and then make the public interest statement based on where that gets set. So those were like the big things that I was analyzing coming in here to talk about today. Then I don't have firmly in my head the list of holes, but just want to know if there are other things that I've oversimplified with that analysis.
I did have a question, I guess, going back to this subsidy issue. The RD proposed to determine that a subsidy was in the public interest. This order stopped short of that. Also, the RD has this mechanism where the revenues that the utility is not collecting from the subscribers is put into a regulatory asset, and then a later rulemaking would really determine the level of I guess the avoided cost, and then therefore the subsidy. What I'm wondering is if we take the approach outlined here and defer the calculation of the subsidy to a later rulemaking and approve the regulatory assets, could we get to a situation where, de facto there is a subsidy, yet, the commission has not made a determination on whether a subsidy is in the public interest?
I want to say that yes, that is possible. And then the commission would be left with the question as to whether the subsidy is in the public interest. And then you would have to answer that question.
Would de facto exist?
Well, I think you would have to say, look at the subsidy and say, is this in the public interest as we have defined it? Takes into account a lot of balancing and examining factors. And if not, then it's would go back to the drawing table. So, yeah.
Then in the chicken and egg world that we're dealing with, I'm not sure we know that a subsidy is required. And it requires information we're never gonna have, right? So just my concept is developers know what revenue they're going to need for the project to succeed. Solar bill credit's important because then developers will be able to say, hey, subscriber, we need you to pay this. It's going to have the impact of that on your total bill. And then based on that sales pitch, they should be able to assess whether they can go to the bank and get financing for the project. So that's just my concept. Clearly, community solar program is in the public interest. Having a program means you got to have some projects. If it's impossible to have projects without a subsidy, then that's where it starts kicking in. But we're not going to know if a subsidy is required until we set a number and projects show that it's too low.
And, you know, again, I guess my feeling is that with the current rule that we have in place, you know, I think a subsidy is virtually guaranteed by our current rule.
Yeah, that I'd like to hear more about because I see it more as the concept that Commissioner Aguilera gave, which is you kind of set tariffs and then you reconcile. And in that reconciliation process, adjusting to obey the subsidy is where that falls out. So just because, yeah, there might be a subsidy inherently built in when you set the number, it doesn't mean there isn't a process that heals it.
You mean if there is some mechanism to sort of claw back any amounts that are above what any amounts that are above what are defined by law, or any amounts that are above a subsidy is essentially what you're saying.
Well, I wasn't saying
Like
claw back, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, like this solar, like the solar, I forget the term that SPS used, but you know, sort of a solar bill credit rider that would only apply to subscribers and that would effectively result in no subsidy. And so you know, I guess what concerns me about, you know, all these things that, you know, seem to be workarounds are our current rule and just make it hard for people to really figure out, are they getting a good deal with community solar or not? And, you know, if we could just straightforwardly set a solar bill credit that seems fair and, you know, not allow these, you know, various mechanisms that try to, you know, reduce the amount of solar bill credit. I just think it would be a lot more straightforward.
Okay. So what we were trying to do was get to a summary of what's on the page, so then we could go to what's not on the page. And does everybody feel okay with taking that step? Or still want to talk about it?
Well, I would just say that I'm not sure that there is a subsidy. I think a lot of it depends on how you're valuing the benefits of the community solar projects. I think that if they're valued fairly, there is no need for any kind of subsidy. And so that I think is important. And so I think not answering that. And that's why I was asking, like, is this on a case by case basis? Cause then, you know, you can see what the actual results are of the cost and the benefits, and then you could make a determination later. So, yeah, I think I'm,
I mean, look, you know, again, I guess, let me just add, I think that, you know, if our current rule is resulting in numbers like 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour for the solar bill credit, I just don't see any way how the value of the community solar is going to exceed that. You know, it's just a huge number. And you know, maybe I'm thinking of this somewhat simplistically, but you know, I kind of see it as almost like retail choice, where you know, instead of getting your power from the utility, you're getting your power from the community solar facility. You know, you still need to pay for distribution and transmission and billing. You're just getting your energy somewhere else, and you know, I think we have the ability to move closer to that in the rule that we have. And I guess focusing on this final order version number 1, you know, I guess one thing that I'm hesitant about in it, paragraph 16 says that the commission finds the program as a whole is in the public interest as defined in the RD. You know, I don't think anyone's asking us to make that determination. I think the legislature made that determination when they passed the Community Solar Act, that they believe that a community solar program that, you know, results in no subsidy is in the public interest. You know, they've made the call. I don't think we need to weigh in and say whether the program as a whole is in the public interest or not.
For me, the value of that was just stepping through why. You know, because for example, the subsidy was, we're not making a statement on public interest, because if you start out with 0 and find out later it needs to be higher, don't embed in the RD that 0 is the public interest. So that was it, to provide some contrast against that. But yeah, I agree. There's a law that says we're going to community solar, so community solar is in the public interest.
I think if I can just jump in there, I think because we don't have a definition of the public interest, it's such a nebulous term, that the way that the commission defines it kind of implies that the commission has to look at interests of multitude. There are a multitude of factors that need to be examined when determining whether it's in the public interest. So yes, obviously the legislature's implementation of this means that this program is in the public interest, but as defined by the commission, I think that was the idea there, to just make really clear that all of these different factors that the commission is going to be examining. So those 2 questions, the solar bill credit, and then how the tariffs are going to have to be refiled, are kind of the main points. But there are other questions that are kind of implicit within those bigger ones that need to be addressed. And I can go through those one by one, or how is that the best way?
That's what I would appreciate. if
Okay.
somebody else-
Sure, okay. So the first one is whether the commission should accept, reject, or modify SPS as bill credit cost recovery rider. And then, but implicit within that question then is what constitutes avoided costs for these purposes. The recommended decision recommended SPS as cost recovery rider be rejected because the recommended decision says it does not comport with the recommendation that the avoided cost benefits should be initially tracked through these cost categories. And then recommends a rulemaking to finalize a methodology for cost recovery of subsidization amounts after it determines of, avoided costs. We do have a rule 570 talks about what avoided costs are. But so ultimately that's the question there. Is this something that needs to be examined in a rulemaking? And then do we accept, reject, modify SBS's bill of cost recovery rider? Do you want me to stop there or keep going?
Well, to me, that was part of the whole concept of providing definition.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And kind of, we were rejecting everybody's rider
Right.
because everybody probably
Right.
gets a list on SBC and then saying refile in 10 days.
Yeah.
Just because we've been circling the drain on this for so long that it doesn't feel like it should take very long.
I guess the question would be, should the commission initiate a making to finalize the methodology for cost recovery? That's a big question, I know, so.
Well, I mean, that is a good question because we already do have, I thought, a rulemaking open to address things like what we saw in the procurement process for community solar. So I thought a good outcome for today would be, let's provide definition around SBC.
Okay.
Let's set the pointer on subsidy. And then identify things that are on the list for further review in the rulemaking, but at least provide the certainty of how SBC should be calculated. And then 10 days from now, we'll get utilities calculation based on that direction.
Okay.
So anyway, that was the concept I was pursuing when I was working through what you're calling version 1. And I hope that that's something that we can at least try to reach and figure out. Know for sure if we can't reach it. And if we can't, then I'm confident if we can't get it today, we will get it on the 21st.
Okay. Okay. So then I will stop there then, and then that's the question that needs to be answered.
What's the rest of this?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I was afraid I was oversimplifying the problem, and part of what you gave was a great example of that. I know it's a facet of the bigger thing, but
Right.
once you say, here's what SBC is, you're rejecting SPSs, right?
I think actually the remainder of
Or
what's on my list is all kind of it stems from that main question about the solar bill credit. And then the second piece, how is it going to be recaptured by the utilities? So I think we do need to start there, and then we can go from there.
And then in terms of looking at solar, I'll just throw out their concept. I'm happy to learn from wisdom of the group, and my concept isn't the my way or the highway kind of thing, but we had from SPS a very well documented but relatively simple approach, right? That it's retail price of electricity that gets subtracted from TARR, right? So on the other hand, we had joint parties, which had a very long list of things, but without a real quantification or concept of what those things might mean. It's possible that everything on their list, the value is 0. So it's possible, I mean, unlikely, but possible that joint parties in SPS had the same answer. So that was part of my concept, is just kind of looking at the list of what was provided as things that get subtracted from TARR, saying these are the things that get subtracted to get you your or to create the SPC that gets subtracted from GAR, sorry. Methodology or terminology is driving me nuts here, but, and then have the list of, hey, people have brought these other things up. If you think it's a non-zero value, prove it.
I mean, just to interject here, wasn't it El Paso Electric's rate that, you know, the RD recommended upholding? No,
I apologize, Commissioner, I don't remember.
Um,
Oh, getting it up.
I thought you said that.
I thought there were niggles with every single one of them.
On the avoided cost, I really don't like using that term here because I feel like it could get conflated with what avoided cost means under PURPA. And PURPA, you know, that has resulted in a certain avoided cost, and this is a different law. And I don't think they're necessarily the same thing. They don't have to be the same thing. It could be, but I think that if we're using an LMP, we're really only compensating for energy. And I do believe there is a capacity value here being provided at an appropriate effective load carrying capacity. And so I liked the RD's approach of tracking everything. And as you said, Chair, then, you know, you can prove it later. I believe that, you know, they probably will. There's more value being provided here than just energy. And so when I am reading avoided costs, in my brain, I'm kind of flipping that term to be benefits, because I think that's something else you could call it.
No, thank you for that. I mean, that my fundamental problem with this is too many double negatives, right? So you're helping with that, and it's benefits that the community solar project or program are providing the system. The way I was thinking through that, but
Which is a cost to the rest of the system.
right.
But
So I kind of didn't expect, just because I know I wouldn't like it if somebody else did this to me, but I didn't expect that we'd be able to just look at the list of every benefit that was described and pick, say, these are clearly benefits, they need to be included in solar bill credit calculation. If we're ready to do that, that's great. I didn't expect the answer to that be yes. So anyway, proposal would be, and Miguel's already working on it, just a table that shows here's what it's proposed, and RD discusses all of them. So it's just kind of a summary of what's in the RD, right? Here's the list of benefits that should be included in solar bill credit, which party proposed them. And some of them, that might help us with the terminology thing by just putting things on a line and think about, did this really mean the same as that for a different party, different utility? And then from that, I hope what will emerge are clear items that no doubt are benefit, they should be included. And then the rest would be, people brought this up, I understand why they brought it up, but somebody needs to prove to me why that's a number bigger than zero. And then there might be some things like, no, this is not a benefit that community solar creates for the system. So anyway, that's what I hope to achieve by putting the table, and then putting the table in the order, I think, would help the world understand how we got to where we're going. So that was a suggestion that I was bringing to the table for today. It's frustrating because I want to decide this today, but I was trying to think, what do I need? And it's not here yet. I could create it, but that's not fair to either of you. So I think it could be created and available on the 21st.
Yeah, I think that would be extremely helpful for everybody. I mean, if what this order is doing is rejecting the filings, I think the best thing to do is to reject it with the kind of guidance that you just mentioned. And that way, we're just, we asked the utility for a rock and they brought us one, and then we're saying not that one. But at least, we start to explain what it is that we are looking for here.
And then the other big issue, the subsidy, is the way the law is written. The instructions to me are there shouldn't be a subsidy, right? So knowing that and knowing that reality is messy, that's why this idea that there's a provision that trues things up is important, because I worry about the integrity of whatever number you pick. And then that's another thing where we need projects to move forward to have community solar. Again, I have no idea what the economics are of individual projects. It just is not something that's ever been provided. It wasn't part of the scoring matrix when the projects got picked. So just taking what the law tells me is we should start with subsidy being 0. And then, because then the law says, okay, but then if you find out you do need a subsidy, no more than 3%, right? So rather than just starting at 3% and then that becoming a fact, the law tells me start at 0, and it gives me a little flexibility if 0 means we don't have community solar projects. So those were my 2 ideas coming into this meeting of how to try to resolve a lot of what I saw in the draft that we had in front of us. It doesn't solve the problem of wanting to vote today, but it, I think, gives a path that if we agree on the path, we have something to vote on the 21st. And then, having said that, I still, if Commissioner Ellison, if you want to continue to work on version 2, I can't consider it until I see what it means. If it looks to me like 6 months with a 50-50 chance of improvement, which I'm voting that no, but if it's a better look than that.
Okay.
Right. And so, I mean, I think we all, it sounds like we all agree, and maybe for different reasons, but that and for me, I think that if, as I said, that if the project is valued correctly, there is no subsidy, and therefore there would be no subsidy needed. But I understand that we have different reasons. So what does it mean to say that it's 0? Does that mean we reevaluate once we know more?
Yeah, that's a messy future, right? Because worst outcome would be instructions are write these tariffs with no, here's SBC, write your tariffs without any subsidization. And then the community, the projects that have been selected, all of them come back and say, we're done. If that's, I don't think that's true. I mean, that's just, I'm trying to imagine worst case. Optimistically, I can't imagine that's true. But it will have an impact. I mean, some projects, again, these projects were not picked on economics. They were picked on how do they score against the goals of a community solar program. So that's where the rubber's meeting the road right now, is
they also have to succeed financially or you don't get the benefits, right?
Yeah.
So that would be. I can't even guess which projects would not survive this zero subsidization limit. So that's kind of what I'm expecting is we'll have to set a tariff and then see what happens to the projects that were bid in. Knowing that it's probably gonna, some projects are gonna fall out. I think some projects were gonna fall out anyway. I also think subscribers are gonna pick the projects, right? That, based on people will sign up because they like what the project's offering, or they're gonna sign up because it gives them the best economics. I don't know why people will pick them, but I think some projects are gonna be more popular than others, and that's gonna affect whether they live or die also. It's not just the decisions we make. So it's a messy thing that we don't have complete control over. And that's okay. I mean, that again, it's our job to implement the law.
Yeah.
As
No.
best we can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think a lot of it is gonna rest on what the interconnection costs are for any given project. And so I'm certainly okay with not declaring that a subsidy right now is in the public interest. I don't think we know that. And again, I think that, and so I agree with stating that so long as we don't preclude that from occurring in the future. And the reason why is kind of two things. One of them is how is the project going to be, how are the benefits going to be valued? I think if you're just paying them for energy, then I would say that a subsidy is in the public interest. But if you're paying them for the full complement of their attributes, then I don't think a subsidy even comes into play. And then the other part is that the statute here is considering low income customers. And so that might be something that leads us to find that a subsidy would be in the public interest, is if in order to succeed and, to really appreciate and fulfill the spirit of the act, which is attempting to reserve some of this capacity for low income customers, then, we might, or the commission might take that into consideration in the future.
I agree with that. I mean, and we might, through this motion for rehearing process, end up with a longer list than you and I just came up with here at this meeting. Commissioner Ellison, did you have something?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just wanted to, I guess, comment. I'm in agreement with the sentiment that, the law really requires us to see if we can make this work with no subsidy, and also gives us the flexibility that if a small amount of subsidy is needed, we have that within our discretion in order for the program to work. I guess where I'm differing is that I think that our rule makes it difficult to do that in the way that it specifies the solar bill credit, especially in the way that it says transmission costs cannot be deducted from the solar bill credit. If you accept the workarounds that the utilities have proposed, I suppose then you can get to the same result without changing the rule. I just think it would be more clean to do it in a more straightforward manner and not have these workarounds. And you know, I guess, you know, we'll see in terms of, you know, the benefits and the value of solar. You know, I have my concerns that, you know, say if you look at the P&M system, you know, there's a lot of solar, a lot of utility scale solar. And if you look at the, you know, effective load carrying capacity of new solar, I think it was something like, you know, 4% of the nominal capacity. And, you know, it's causing the peak to be shifted later on into the evening when, you know, there's no sun. And so, you know, the value of additional solar to meeting peak demand, you know, really, you know, appears to be quite marginal. But, you know, I certainly, I certainly think that, you know, there is a place for community solar, and that we're being directed to do our best to make it happen within reason. And you know, I think our best shot at it is really to revise the rule. But you know, I understand other points of view on that.
Ms. LeCoq, is there anything else we need to discuss here?
I think I have a good idea of where to go from here. I just want to understand the next steps. And I don't know procedurally, Mr. Cameron, if you want to help figure out what the next step is for this. Are we tabling it? Or
Well,
I
we
can-
haven't moved anything
Oh, yeah,
yet.
that's true, yeah.
So
Right.
my understanding of the next steps would be, let's keep working on these orders. I think we've described what would need to be done
Yep.
to make either of them votable. And just iteration, final order version 1 is just exactly that. Let's zero in on solar bill credit so that
Okay.
we can provide clear direction to the utilities on solar bill credit. And if we feel like we need more exposition of our understanding, here's how things, just the annual cycle of things, because yeah, it's clear there are things in here that change from year to year. So it's not like solar bill credit is gonna be 6 cents, you know. It's gonna be, here's the things and here's how it gets calculated, here's how it gets reconciled, here's how it is transparent. If we feel like we need more in here, just so the 3 of us are sure we agree with what that means, that's valuable too. And then the other is, if we're just gonna kick it to rewriting the rule, we need to deal with this case, and we need to, I think, I would want to see the NOPR, frankly, get it to that level before, or a draft of a NOPR, thinking that maybe we'll have a workshop before we issue a NOPR. But I want to see schedule, I want to see process, I want a realistic, how soon could this happen kind of thing, because we need to keep this moving.
Yeah. Okay.
And if there is, hey, that's a path that gets us there faster, maybe I'm all for that, but don't see it yet.
Okay.
So anyway, that was my suggestion for the work to do between now and 10 days from now.
Okay.
So then procedurally, it's on the agenda. We've had a few cases where we discussed it, but then didn't have any motions and no votes. So I think by acclaim, we can move on.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
We get to move on with you. And I just also just personal note, I mean. Community solar is important and complicated, so I appreciate everybody's effort along the way. I share in frustration of let's get it moving faster, but it's the whole, if you want to go far, go together is the way I look at it, so. That was what was in the back of my head when I was thinking I don't like holding it another 10 days, but I think it's important.
And I just do want to stress, Mr. Chair, that I want to see a successful program.
Yeah.
And I just kind of think, hitting the reset button may be the best path to doing that.
Yeah, and I was trying to make it clear that I'm convincible on that. I just haven't been convinced yet, so. Cause yeah, that's really the premium is keep it moving, which is gonna require efficiency or action from us.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Okay, so that gets us to the end of our regular action items. Next item is communications with Chief of Staff.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lots happening, but not a whole lot for me to update you on. Good news from our seminar. At least personally, I thought it went off very well. Thank you all for monitoring the panels that you did and everybody who participated, and a special thanks to our speakers who took their time out to talk with us. Good news is our participation was up 20% from last year. So we had around 80 last year, and this year we were over 100. So we're growing. And so far the feedback was positive. People really appreciated it and enjoyed it. If you're wondering about CLE credits, we're still working with the bar to iron out details, but we anticipate having a solution for you very shortly. Next on my update is our annual report is due December 1st by statute. We anticipate, I know for a fact, Mr. Gutierrez has a draft of it and is worrying over it. So we'll have a draft for you to review shortly before we submit that. And then last but not least, we are scheduled to present our budget in front of the Legislative Finance Committee on Monday afternoon. So I know, Mr. Chair, you will be unavailable for that, but I would appreciate the rest of the commission attending because I think it would be helpful. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Yeah, again, I just want to thank you and Jordan for the CLE event. I attended a few conferences over the last 2 years, and it was on par with the best ones I've been to there in terms of quality of information. And the other thing that happens at events like that is the back of the room conversations, right? That the group that works on the stuff we work with, it's helpful just to have how you doing kind of conversations with everybody, just because this is we're in the business of human beings, right? So it's nice to interact with people and know you're not alone. And so anyway, that was a side benefit of that event, in addition to well designed and pulled off program. Thank you.
And I just add my thanks as well to Jordan and everybody else who, made it a reality, including the speakers. I thought it was great, and I'd say that it's in the public interest to do it again next year.
Yeah, I wanted to add my appreciation and also note that it was free of charge for everyone. And so it was very generous of us. So it was great all around.
Yeah, this one of the things I did this week was the Western Conference of Public Service Commissioners meets every time NARUC meets, and lately conferences have been big money makers, so we didn't do that, so. But I think it's just because there is a desire for people to come together, right? So you offer a good content, you're gonna attract people because they also want to just see each other.
Well, thank you, commissioners. We're gonna try to make it not free so that we can avoid, we don't want to make any money, but we also want to avoid any hiccups with the bar or other refreshments, whatnot. So we still haven't worked out how to exactly do that with DFA yet. And so that'll be in between now and next year. Hopefully we can have those solutions. But thank you.
Communications with commissioners, I'll go ahead and just keep going with where I started with that. Yeah, I've been at NARUC this week. It was the annual meeting, so they changed their leadership. Is kind of the big point of NARUC meeting there, but a lot of things happened in and around that conference. One was Western Conference of Public Service Commissioners. The meeting for Western Commissioners is going to be in Portland early June. So programming and planning on that is well underway. And then we get to host the next one. So announced it on end of May, like May 31st, June 1st, 2nd, 3rd of 2026. The Western Conference of Public Service Commissioners will be meeting at Tamaya, just north of Bernalillo. And really looking forward to showing off New Mexico, and then also adding, I mean, I like those Western conferences because it's the NARUC topics with a more local regional flair. And I really am looking forward to what we can do for that. And then just broadly, commissioners like coming to New Mexico. So one of the other events was planning for the Current Issues Conference that'll be in April at the El Dorado. And so expecting a good program there. Commissioner Aguilera was selected by popular acclaim in his absence. You don't know how popular you are until you don't show up at something. To take over a role that Commissioner Decker from Oregon has on the CREPC TC. Well, it's CREPC transmission. It's more than just the TC, right? She tells me that you had agreed, so.
Yeah,
Before the room erupted in, yes, we want Gabriel.
yeah, it's for Weeb. So there are co-chairs, one of them for the energy offices in the Western states, and then one of them for the regulatory agencies in the Western states. So there's a co-chair. She had raised this with me, and I didn't say no, and we had sort of agreed that we would talk about it in this, like, more for the spring, for the next meeting. And then I did talk to one of the commissioners, Chair Blank from Colorado yesterday. He congratulated me on being elected co-chair, and I thought he was joking. He was not joking. So yeah, and then
Let's just say rebuttable presumption is it's your job.
yeah, and so then I received an email from Chair Decker from Oregon, and she said she had kind of was trying to just like get the idea out there, and it got a little bit out of hand. And so so that's the result of that. But like the Western Conference Commission, it's an opportunity for us in New Mexico to help lead the conversation that's going on in the West. With the Western Conference, we'll have a big say in what topics we want to discuss. And so the CREPC YREP is a similar thing, where, we'll be able to lead the topics that are being discussed, and that there are 2 conferences per year. So you know, I guess we're just moving on from participating in some of these panels to really setting up these conferences and but I think it's overall really good for our state, even though it's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's right. It's all good, but and then the other thing that happened in Anaheim was the first meeting of this NARUC-FERC collaboration. FERC chose the topic, which is gas electric coordination. I think that led to a little bit of what's NARUC's gas electric task force doing. They have a group called GEAR. And so anyway, GEAR came out with something, a proposal for letting people talk to each other going forward. But then that was just the first meeting of collaboration. It was interesting because I guess the next meeting is where we'll actually start talking to each other. But it was a good kickoff, but you don't, from my point of view, have much collaboration if everybody's speaking from a script. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's an impressive group and everybody's committed and engaged. Where that leads or what comes out of it is interesting. And then, you know, New Mexico, as always, we've got an interesting point of view there because both in WEC and SPP and electric loads being driven by oil and gas production, which is something people hadn't thought of. So those are the kind of things on there. But I made the pitch at the Western group is, you know, my job is to represent Western commissioners, not just New Mexico. So if anybody's got any coordination issues, I'd like to hear them. And then yeah, I think that was it. Just a little tired because I've been traveling. Oh, I went out on Saturday and I had a really good session with the conveners were RAP, RMI, and Energy Innovation. And they were talking about how commissions and commissioners can build affordability into clean energy transition. So I've got some good ideas for what I can do as a commissioner. I'm going to try to socialize a lot of those ideas throughout the PRC so that we can get them embedded into the work we do. And good news is New Mexico, again, we're special because we've got cheapest wind and solar. So we've been able to proceed and get to where we're at without some of the rate increases that have been seen other places. So my position is long may that continue, but it's something that as a commission, we just, not just commissioners, but all of us need to pay attention to as we move forward. So anyway, I got a lot of good ideas. I warned Choya, you know, be forewarned, commissioner with ideas. So sure, I don't, you know, having an idea and knowing how much work my idea is for everybody else is a different thing. So anyway, I'll be working with some folks coming out of this week on those items. So that's my speech.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt, but I came across the announcement that we were trying to remember earlier this morning that you were going to make, and it was about 24-257, the inquiry around grid readiness and the deadline for stakeholders to respond to the bench request is coming up. Do you want me to continue? Yes. I want to pick it up from there. I didn't want to take it from you, but and the deadline, so the utilities have responded already. Their deadline was November 4th, and the stakeholders and staff's deadline is December 4th to respond to those. So.
Yeah, just a reminder, that was the inquiry that was, let's see if there's some way we can get prime the pump or be proactive on investments that need to be made to make sure that we can take advantage of economic development opportunities when they show up. And it's funny because that's, again, not a unique to New Mexico question. It was a topic that came up across a few panels at NARUC too. So anyway, thank you for remembering my reminder. Commissioner Ellison, did you have any?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I completely agree with the sentiment that it's important to focus on what can be done to keep rates reasonable during the energy transition. So I certainly welcome discussions on that topic. I think that's got to be one of the top things that we think about going forward. Our internal group working on the grid mod rulemaking has forwarded me their most recent draft and has proposed that I send that out to the parties via a single signature order. So this would be, again, this is ahead of a NOPR. This is just getting out a draft to the parties to really get feedback on that draft. I'm gonna review that this afternoon and intend to get that out as soon as possible, as long as there aren't any objections.
Just the only wrinkle on that is make sure, if we could get that on the 21st, that'd be great, but if we're gonna do a NOPR, we probably need to vote.
If we're gonna get the oh, do you mean start the NOPR itself?
Right. 'Cause
Okay.
we need to vote to make sure the people we want to participate in the NOPR understand that it has the full support of the full commission. Signal signature order, you don't get that.
Okay, and I guess this, the intent of this was just to get a draft out ahead of a NOPR
Okay,
to, solicit feedback.
yeah.
Is there which meeting would we have that NOPR on for potential vote?
I honestly haven't thought that far.
And if it's a draft to solicit feedback, do I get to give you my feedback?
Yes. Yes. So I think the idea here is maybe to, pre-NOPR, things are a little more flexible, and so take a little time up front to get the feedback before we issue the NOPR and things are locked in place a little more.
You get to bring us home, Commissioner Aguilera.
Okay, well, I really don't have any communications. Thank you for the conversation today. Community solar is a big deal. It's been a difficult filing and program to administer, but I appreciate the desire and effort to get it right. And then Chairman, thank you for attending NARUC. I know the travel is tough, and that's why I decided not to go, but I really appreciate you being there to represent our state.
Yeah, for better or worse, I'm going because that's when those NARUC collaboration meetings are probably gonna be held, so. Happy to go and jealous that you don't have to. But next year we're going, it's in Boston and Seattle. So. Interesting to watch the folks from the Northeast. They have to take all-night red eyes to get from Boston to Anaheim, so we'll be in the opposite situation. But and then the other thing, we're going to Portland for Western Conference, and then New Mexico, and then the next one behind that is Washington State. But Alaska and Hawaii happened just before we became commissioners, and it's an 11-year cycle, so those aren't on the list. And we don't go to Guam.
That's good.
So anyway, again, appreciate conversation and again, I echo your sentiment on community solar. I know it can be frustrating, but I know lots of people are working hard to make it happen. So let's keep doing that. And with that, meeting is adjourned.